Hi, you're very welcome along. It is Thursday here on Off the Ball. It is Richie McCormack with you. And Thursdays mean just one thing. We are joined on the line as ever by the one, the only Mr. John Giles. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Richie.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to hear. I want to start with Molyneux on Monday night, if that's all right with you. Because I guess it's the story that sticks out like a sore thumb. Because it's been, apart from the major incident involving the handball at the Etihad, it's been a quite enough week, but I suppose Manchester United managed to blow that out of the water on Monday. They could have had all 3 points away to Wolves. A 1-1 draw is what they had to content themselves with in the end. But the major talking points surrounded that second half penalty, which was taken by Paul Pogba, saved by Rui Patricio. But it was the lead up to that penalty that I guess has caused the most intrigue, with Marcus Rashford and Paul Pogba essentially having a game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who takes penalties. Not the most ideal way of deciding a penalty taker, if I was to pick your brain on that one.
No, it's actually one of the worst things, Richie, because people were saying afterwards, well, who is the penalty taker? And we heard afterwards from the manager that they have two designated penalty takers. Well, I don't think you can have two designated penalty takers. You have your penalty taker and you have a reserve penalty taker, because if the penalty taker is injured or he's not playing, then you have somebody to fill in for him. But you don't have two designated penalty takers. And then, because what I just read yesterday, Richie, I'll just read it from the paper.
Go on ahead.
First of all, Solskjaer said that Pogba was off penalty duties, and Rashford would be the penalty taker. And then it said in the paper, Solskjaer had been angered by the on-field indecision between Pogba and Rashford over who would take the penalty. And then it said it was revealed yesterday that Solskjaer said that should have been decided before the game who was going to be on duty. Well, this is total nonsense, Richie. The manager is responsible for this. That when you come into a game as manager Solskjaer, this is off the field things that you have to sort out, and sort out very, very quickly, and it's very simple. If it's Pogba or Rashford is the penalty taker, they are the penalty taker. You don't have two penalty takers. And what happened at Molyneux was, it looked like a little bit of a row between Rashford and Pogba, who would take it. And Rashford said, okay, you take it. And as we know, he missed it. It should never be the case. And Solskjaer is actually blaming the two players for it. He's responsible for it, Richie. He's the manager. When you take over as manager, that's a simple thing to sort out. You have a penalty taker, and that's the penalty taker. You don't have two penalty takers. It's like on Monday night, say for example, or some stage, we have two designated penalty takers, Richie. Say neither of them are not keen on taking the penalty. What do you do? Like the other night, it looked like two wants to take it, and Rashford said, okay, you take it. But and what Solskjaer saying, this should have been sorted out. It should have been sorted out the week that Solskjaer took over the job as manager, as who said, who's the penalty taker, or I want you to be the designated penalty. That's the end of it. There shouldn't be any dispute between the players who is to decide before they go out. The manager's blaming the two players here, and it's absolute rubbish.
The quote he had after the match on Monday, when he was pressed about this, he says, it's up to them there and then who feels, quote unquote, this is mine. Sometimes players just feel they're confident enough to score. Paul has scored so many penalties for us, and today Rui Patricio made a good save. The two of them have been very confident. I like players with confidence and the feeling that I can do this. Now, obviously, it has sparked outrage from the likes of Gary Neville, says it's like the acts of an under-5 side, Mark Ogden, the journalist saying that this United side lacks leadership, and I guess that's on the pitch is where Ogden is talking about it. But like a manager that allows his players, and one of whom has only scored less than 2 out of every 3 penalties he's taken for the club, like it's not a good sign from Solskjaer that he's allowed this to develop, particularly as you pointed out there with that quote from last season, whereby he wanted a definite penalty taker. He wanted somebody who was designated before going out on the pitch to go and take this.
Yeah, well, that's what you do. It doesn't matter whether it's Manchester or anybody else. It's very simple. This is not a big deal. When you're the manager of your team, you have a designated penalty taker. You don't have two going out to sort it out on the day, or when the penalty is given. Now, who are we going to take? Who's going to take it? It's rubbish because I said before. Say the two of them are not keen on taking. Either of them are not keen on taking. And one says, "Well, you take it." No, you take it. You take it. It's the designated penalty taker, the penalty taker, and that's it. There shouldn't be two people on the pitch, as Solskjaer is saying. Sort it out between you. Who's going to take it? Or before you go on the pitch, between you, it's not them to sort it out. It's his job to sort it out. Say, if we get a penalty kick, you're going to take it. And the designated penalty kick usually takes all the penalties, Richie. Unless it gets to the stage where he whistles a few and the manager says, well, we need a change.
Take it off him.
Or the player himself volunteers to say, look, I'm not too keen on taking the penalties anymore. And then somebody else is given the job. But what happened actually, Solskjaer was making it up as he went along after the match, and then actually blaming the two players why they didn't sort it out between them before the game, before they went out on the pitch.
It's an odd scenario for sure. It's one that you go to the worst case scenario for this, I guess, which is, if they're both feeling confident, we get a scene which is slightly uglier than the one we saw on Monday, which wasn't ugly at all, whereby you could have two players getting absolutely thick at one another and trying to wrestle the ball from the other. And
actually, I don't think Rashford was too pleased about it. Now, he behaved himself well, but he had the ball in his hands first, Richie.
Yeah.
If you look, when you saw the game, I think you saw it. I assume you saw it. Like, he picked up the ball first to take the penalty. There's no doubt about that. And then Pogba must have said, well, I think I should take it because, and I read it in the paper, which was more nonsense, or the papers more nonsense, that Rashford last week was the one that was fouled, so he'd take the penalty. The other night, it was Pogba that was fouled for the penalty, so he felt that he should take the penalty. This is this gets worse as it goes along. Just because you're taken down to take a penalty doesn't mean it gives you a right to take the penalty. The penalty taker takes the penalties. End of story. And obviously what happened was with Solskjaer, and he's been there long enough to sort that out and to give it to the designated man. He was making it out during the match, after the match, that it wasn't his fault. In other words, they should have sorted it out before they went out. They shouldn't have been doing it on the pitch. Well, you don't sort it out on the dressing room before you go out. That's already sorted out from week one when the new manager like Solskjaer comes in and he says, well, who's the designated penalty? Okay, that's it. You take all the penalties. There should be no talk on the pitch about it, Richie.
And you would expect it's a situation whereby a strong captain, should there be one on the pitch, would actually intervene and say, listen, whoever has the ball first, if we do have this nonsense scenario where two of them are designated penalty takers, Rashford picks up the ball as he did on Monday night, you would think they would have a strong enough captain to step in and say, well, Marcus obviously feels that he should be taking this one.
You can't do that, Richie. There's no need for that.
I know there's no need for it, but you would figure that there's got to be a stronger leadership on the pitch. And
you have the leadership in the manager is the leader, and this is no big deal to say who is the designated penalty taker. He didn't do that. And what he said afterwards, there was two designated penalty takers. So even the captain on the pitch, right, who was he to decide at that particular time where there's a row between the two of them, who's going to take? In other words, there should never be a row. That's sorted out the first week you're there as a manager. This should never happen, Richie. Of course, somebody else could be on the pitch. Say the captain, they did have somebody. Say Roy Keane said to Rashford, if it was Rashford or Scholes and somebody else in his day, I think you should take it. And the other guy, like Neville, could have said, if it was Neville, no, I don't think you're right. I should be taking it. It shouldn't happen, Richie. It's not that you need an extra leader on the pitch. The leader, the big leader in any team, is the manager. And this is an off-field situation where it's no big deal to say who is the designated penalty. The fact is, he didn't do it. Solskjaer, he slipped up, and he was making excuses afterwards to get on to the players, say you should have had this sorted out before you went on the pitch. He should have had it sorted out from the first week he came to the club, who was going to be taking the penalty kicks.
It's a weird one, and I suppose ultimately it's the main crux of the matter is it's 2 points dropped for Manchester United. How have you viewed them in the limited, I suppose, evidence that we've seen before us so far this season? I mean, a big opening day win against Chelsea. They seem to almost revert to type in the Manchester United we saw last season against Wolves on Monday night, but then again, Wolves are a good and improving side and probably worthy of the point as well.
Yeah, well, the first half was all United's. There's no doubt about that. And Wolves came in. But like, Wolves are a fair side, as you say, Richie. They'll give anybody a game. And they did come into the game in the second half. But when you're in a tight game like they were winning 1-0, to have a penalty to win it. I mean, the thing is as well, like Pogba could have scored from the penalty kick. The goalkeeper made a good save, so we wouldn't be talking about it in the way that we're talking about it. People would say, "Oh, that was a good idea, having the designated penalty, two of them on the pitch, and Pogba wanted to take it." But in the long run, it's I don't think it is a good idea at all. To be honest, Richie, that this shouldn't happen. It should be designated penalty taker takes the penalty kicks. End of story.
Some of the stuff that's followed after it, John, I don't know if you would have been really aware of this. I know you're not a big Twitter guy yourself, but some of the reaction to Paul Pogba's miss was obviously of racially motivated kind of abuse towards Pogba. United were pretty quick about stepping in afterwards and saying how disgraceful this has all been, and Harry Maguire, I guess, was the most outspoken as well, which suggests that he's settling in pretty well there. I don't know how you viewed Maguire's on-pitch activity so far for United, John.
I think he's a top-class player, Richie. There's no doubt about that. And I think he's a great signing for them. I think Manchester City will rue the day that they didn't make a bigger effort to get him. No, he's terrific. And any racist abuse is terrible, or any abuse of a player. Was it because he missed a penalty?
Yeah. This has been a regular theme where if by somebody misses a penalty, or if somebody, I guess, gets sent off in a manner that people disagree with, it seems to be there's a growing trend towards people, obviously enough in a semi-anonymous fashion, going after these players in a particularly racially motivated manner. I mean, it's something that Kick It Out, who obviously look after and want to rail against racism, do fine work over in the UK on that front. They've almost been, they've spokespeople for them have said they're almost sick of putting out this message week after week that this has to stop. So United,
and it's probably Manchester United supporters that were abusing them, was it?
I don't know what way they're leaning, but either way, I guess we can say one way or the other that it's not a thing to be encouraged.
No, it's dreadful. I mean, but I'm only trying to work out if it's Manchester United supporters who are disappointed that he missed a penalty and it's racially abused. Like any racist abuse is disgraceful and stupid as well, because he misses a penalty, and we don't know who was making. I would assume, I might be wrong, that it was Manchester United who were disappointed in him not getting a winning penalty. Given racist abuse, it's totally stupid stuff, and has to be cut out, Richie. There should be no room for that. Yeah. It's ridiculous stuff.
John, we'll get to the other main talking point after this. Just hold the line there for us momentarily. I'm going to be talking about events involving VAR and handballs at the Etihad up after this.
Okay.
And you're very welcome back to offtheball.com and indeed all our streaming sites at the moment. John Giles joins us on the line. John, the other main talking point coming from the weekend just gone was at the Etihad, where Manchester City, and not for the first time in the last 6 months, thought they'd had a late winner against Tottenham at the same ground as well. But VAR and the officials at Stockley Park had other ideas. The ball striking the hand of Aymeric Laporte en route to Gabriel Jesus, who eventually finished past the Spurs goalkeeper. But the goal chalked off. I can't remember during what game or after what game it was, but I know you were in with me at some point during the course of last season, John, and you had the suggestion, and which has pretty much been borne fruit in terms of the new handball rule even, that all handballs, intentional or otherwise, should be deemed fouls. This is essentially how it's playing out now. How do you feel it's working?
Well, first of all, the incident last week didn't have much to do with VAR, actually, Richie.
Yeah, it's more the handball rule itself.
It was the handball rules, which they've complicated now, in my opinion. What they're saying now, if an attacker handles the ball in any way, accidental or not, and it leads to a goal, then it has to be disallowed. If a defender handles the ball and it's accidental, then nothing happens, Richie. Do you know what I mean? Like what they've done now with the rules. I mean, the simple rule used to be: was it accidental or was it intentional for a handball? Right now, they've gone away from that to go to, well, if he handles it and it leads to a goal and all that. It's complicated, and a lot of people said, "Oh, this VAR is nonsense. It's so good." It had nothing to do with VAR last week. It had to do with the rules that they've changed in the close season. That's what they've done. And I don't agree with it because I think it's complicated everything. Because there's no doubt that the Manchester City player in no way intended to handle the ball. He went for the ball and it hit his hand. And even the Spurs players didn't appeal for a handball in any way whatsoever. So that's the rules now. And we've got to live with that. But with people who are anti-VAR, then I heard them and read about them blaming VAR on the incident. It didn't have anything to do with VAR, really.
The handball rule, though, IFAB, who are obviously in charge of the rules of the game, essentially, they say that these incidents and this incident in particular, the Etihad, isn't going to do anything to change how they operate this handball rule. Do you think the rule itself is sustainable in its current form?
I don't know. I think it's a bit of a mess, Richie. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it was changed. Obviously, VAR came into it to show that the ball did strike the Manchester City's hand, but there's no way anybody would ever consider that was intentional. So I think they've complicated the rules now because it doesn't seem right to me. And like the rules are what the rules are, and what will happen as well. It'll go for you one week, it'll go against you next week. But I think it's actually complicated the situation, Richie.
How would you rectify it yourself?
Well, I'd go back to if you were talking about the incident last week.
Yeah. If
it's obviously accidental, then it's accidental. It shouldn't. It went to VAR for VAR to see there was a handball. The Spurs players would be the first to say, well, that was a handball at the time. They didn't appeal it. They were absolutely surprised themselves. So I don't agree with that particular rule. I would rather go back to the old rule. Was it intentional? Was it not intentional? And I think last week, the referee didn't even see it, Richie.
That's the worry, because it seems to be, I know VAR in and of itself, when used correctly, is absolutely a good thing. It's the fact that it has to tie in with rules on the pitch that have become slightly more complicated and less about the natural view of the game, and definitely against the natural flow of the game. And ultimately, that's what's getting hurt here.
Well, yeah, but it's not VAR that's done that, Richie. It's the rules that have done that. The people have changed the rules to that. What they've said now, if the Manchester City attacker handles the ball and somehow or other leads to a goal, then it's ruled out. That's like, I can't see that being the fault of VAR, because the referee didn't see it. Obviously the referee didn't see it. Nobody saw it until it came to that. So it's the rules that change it. In other words, if it wasn't the rules last week, VAR wouldn't have come into it. If it wasn't the rules, say the rules hadn't been changed, VAR wouldn't have come into that. Or if it did come into it, Richie, then the referee could look at it and say, well, there's no way he intended to do that.
Do you not think that there's a sense that we could be losing the natural flow of the game? Both, and setting VAR aside, but if we're going to bring in a handball rule such as it is,
definitely. I'm totally against that new rule.
Yeah,
that's what I say. I agree with VAR. I think VAR is good and will be good and will get better. But when the referees the people in charge of the game are changing the actual rule, well, that's a different story altogether. In fact, if there was no VAR and the referee saw that incident the other day, right, and knew in his own mind that he didn't intend to do that, there wouldn't have been any penalty. It wasn't VAR that made it. It was, even if the referee had seen it, Richie.
Yeah.
Right, and said, well, no, that's definitely accidental, which it was. There wouldn't have been any. It wouldn't have been disallowed the goal.
The weird thing about the goal, even though it wasn't given, was that it brought together Sergio Aguero and Pep Guardiola together again in an embrace. They fell out pretty obviously on the sideline. Aguero was substituted at the time, and they had a bit of a coming together, a difference of opinion, I suppose some people might call it, on the sideline. How did you view that?
Well, I'll tell you, when a game has gone on, Richie, it's a very emotional time, if that's the right word, for player and manager. Right? Guardiola obviously has a job to do, which is to win matches. And if it means, in his opinion, taking Aguero off, then that's what he does. Now, I know from being a player myself, every player hates being substituted, Richie. Everybody hates it. I was substituted a couple of times, and I hated it. So Aguero had scored a goal early on. He's in the game. He's trying to get the winner, and the manager's taking him off. Now, I think he said something on the way off to Guardiola, and then Guardiola said something to him. But from Manchester City's point of view, and the two individuals involved in it, they did hug each other at the end of it. I think Aguero would have realised, I shouldn't have done that, and I think Guardiola would have realised, I shouldn't have done that. But they made up. And it's a difficult situation for managers, because he's a terrific player. He scored a great goal. He scored a lot of great goals for Manchester City. But Guardiola has to believe, I have to make the substitution. And in fact, Richie, to talking about that incident, if the goal had been allowed, a lot of people would have said, what a great substitution that was. And he would have been justified in doing it.
Does that kind of disagreement, or that kind of, I suppose, as visible a falling out, does that kind of thing stick in a manager's mind? I don't know if you've had any past instances yourself with it as a player, or indeed as a manager. Is that the kind of thing, regardless of the kissing and making up on the sideline before the end of the match, does that enter the manager's thinking going forward, that, you know, this guy's a bit of a hair trigger, I don't know if I can necessarily count on him to relay what I want to do on the pitch? No, I don't. I think the two of them are pros. And he's been there a long time, Aguero, and he scored a lot of goals. No, I wouldn't. There'd be no problem with that. I mean, there have been problems and can be problems between manager and player under any situation, particularly if he's taken off and they're not getting on, generally speaking. But I think Aguero and Guardiola have great respect for each other, or else they wouldn't have been making up like they did. if it's an ongoing thing, Richie, they don't make up in the way that they made up, and you'll find that I'd say it'd be odds on for the next match, Aguero will start the game as well. Yeah. See, it's difficult for managers, because he would realise Aguero's been a great player for Manchester City. He's been a great player for him. But can the change I'm making win us this match? That's all he's thinking at the moment. When a manager can only think of the 90 minutes, not the past. You know, Aguero's been a great player for them. Hopefully he'll be a great player in the future. But he can't be thinking, I don't want to take him off because he's been a great player for me. He obviously believes, I get this new guy on, and actually he did score the goal for them to win it, and it was ruled out, as we've spoken about early on. So it's an emotional time. Players hate being, any player I think hates being substituted, Richie. And Aguero would feel that, and he probably did say something. But they made up, and I think they'll appreciate, once they cool down and Aguero cools down, I'd say they'd probably speak the next day or the day after the match about the situation as well. And Aguero, I'd say Guardiola would say, look, I know you got annoyed, but I had to do my job and I had to do what needed to be done, and I think Aguero would understand that. So I think the next time he picks the team, Aguero will be on the team, and he will give his best from there. It is an emotional game, and it's very, very difficult for a manager and a player to not to be annoyed or upset about it when it happens, Richie. And that game as well, I suppose, and the result in particular, shows that Tottenham, from their point of view, can still go toe-to-toe with sides like Manchester City, as good as they are.
I'm not so sure they went toe-to-toe with them in that particular match, Richie. I think they had 2 shots in relation to 30 shots, and then the goal being disallowed. I thought they were lucky to get away with it, Richie, to be quite honest. And result-wise, it was very, very good for them. But I'd say for a vast majority of the game, they were totally outclassed. But they did get the result in the end. But again, it went back to a very difficult VAR decision against Manchester City.
John, do you know what? I have a feeling we might be talking about VAR as the season goes on. It's just something in the back of my mind says it's there.
We've been talking about it for a while, but it'll get better and better and better.
Yeah.
Richie, there's no doubt. Like last week, it was the rules people that created that controversy. It wasn't VAR. VAR will get better and better, and because it's only in its infancy, Richie. But you keep going back to think: has it made the right decision? Has the ball been over the line? Has the ball not been over the line? Gotten to it? It's improved the game. Many times we come away from games, Richie, where I say, was it in? Was it over? Was it offside? Was it not offside? And what you'll find is when the people who gained the advantage from VAR or the decisions in the past, the supporters, they couldn't care less, Richie, whether it was right or whether it was wrong. And what you'll find now, if it goes against, like it did against Manchester City, the supporters are not going to be happy about it. How did the Spurs supporters feel? I mean, actually, last year, I remember Pochettino was totally against VAR.
Yeah, his quote after the City game on Saturday was, "I'm absolutely in love with VAR." Because he's had basically two massive decisions go his way.
Twice he got away with it. Yeah. And actually, there was two incidents last year. I think they played Chelsea in a cup tie. Do you remember Harry Kane was given he wasn't given offside, and it looked odds on that he was offside, and the linesman put his flag up, and they got a penalty from it. And it proved that he was onside. I thought he was well offside, Richie. On a personal thing, I thought he was offside. Went in a big way for Spurs. And in the Champions League, don't forget, it couldn't have gone bigger. You know, Aguero was thinking his big toe was offside, but that's the way it is. It goes for you some weeks, it goes against you the next week. But the fact is, VAR shows, was the ball over the line? Was it a goal? Was it this? Was it that and the other? And supporters who get it in their favour will love it on the day. Supporters who get against them hate it. But the next week it could change totally.
That's
the
football.
Fact is, I mean, a lot of people saying, "Oh, the game has been held up." And I saw a match last year where the people that were not in favour of VAR were going against it. They said this happened, that happened, and at the end of the long conversation against VAR, they said, "But we have to say the decision was right."
John, pleasure as always.
Okay, Richie.
Take care. Again. Have a good week.